Shalom, shalom, shalom to everyone watching. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero with the Ways of Israel, Dietary Laws. We are continuing our series and actually reviews of To Be a Jew, a very, very popular book that I recommend you buy if you're interested in converting to Judaism. We're now entering into Chapter 6. Chapter 6 will be dealing with the dietary laws, really a diet for the soul. The old saying, you are what you eat, comes to the fruition when you understand the rules and laws of kosher. We're to stay away from things that are not kosher, and thus, as we enter into this chapter, keep in mind that it is your responsibility personally as a Jew in process or as a Jew to ensure that whatever you put in your mouth is acceptable according to the standards that is given by God, the Torah, and the rabbinical rules. Kashrut, therefore, in the Hebrew word refers to the Jewish dietary laws. Now, it's a variation of the word kosher, which means fit or proper in accordance to religious law, halacha. Any food that satisfies the requirement of Jewish law is thus fit for eating. So it's not that the rabbis go and bless the food, although we bless, but that doesn't make something kosher. It is a series of rules and laws that we need to look at, that what makes something kosher. There are things that basically don't even require, and we'll talk about this later, a hechsher, a kosher symbol that perhaps a kosher agency or a kashrut agency has stuck on the label. And you'll see, for example, this one that I'm going to have right now, some water. It has a OU there. But water, do you really need a kosher symbol for water? Water is kosher generally, unless you want to make sure it doesn't have any type of other things added to it, fruits or things that may change the taste of it. So let me go ahead and say a blessing, and join me with this blessing. And it's very simple, and that's another area that we'll be looking at, that you also need to learn, is to learn to say different blessings according to different items. This one would be shehakol, since it's water. Same would apply for beer. Same would apply with other liquors. It would say shehakol. And the blessing is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiya vedvaro. So kosher means fit for eating for Jews. And it's a label that has sold billions of dollars in the kosher industry. As a matter of fact, the majority of the people that buy kosher, just to let you know, happen not even to be Jewish. They see the standard as something that provides a value and a level of high standards. And thus, this is why the business of the food industry so pushes the idea of having a kosher label on your product before you utilize it. And like I said from the beginning, you don't need to have everything having a kosher symbol in order to be able to eat it. You need to know the different laws in order to be able to discern whether or not you can eat or drink what you're about to eat or drink. So to make it a little bit easier, the rabbis have created a kosher symbol to help the process, so that when you go to the store, you know exactly what you need to buy and what you need to buy. And there is a lot of infighting within different kosher kashrut agencies, because bottom line, it's a big business, and you have people that want to make billions of dollars. We too have a kosher agency, a kashrut agency called Sephardickosher Supervision, and you can look it up online. You go to Sephardickosher.com, and we do have companies that basically been certified by our agency, and things that we certified tend to be more manufacturing. We don't want to get into the retail or the restaurants and so forth, although we can get into that. I myself served as a mashgiach for many years with the ORB and in particular Kosher Miami here in Florida. And so we saw the need of a Sephardic kosher supervision that needed to take a place in the marketplace, as it were, to be able to provide a level of kashrut for those of you who are from Sephardic background. We have on this several rabbis who also review and check everything. But beyond this, for example, we have some products coming out that happen to be kosher. It's fit, even if you didn't have a label. We have, for example, Yummy, which is a big provider of kosher oats. They also produce kosher dry milk, OUD, or better yet, Sephardic Kosher, D. And they produce honey and a whole bunch of series of products that are under our kashrut label. We also have coming out from Colombia some coffee and some other products, some chips and dry chips that also will be carrying the Sephardic Kosher Supervision label, or rather known as Samek K. So you're going to see this more popular as you see it. It's the letter Samek and the letter K, which is kosher according to the rules of kashrut. So as we go into this, I may want to feature some different things and distinctions between the Ashkenazic kashrut agencies and Sephardic kashrut agencies, because there are some distinctions in what one over the other. Sometimes it may be more machmir, more stricter, and in other cases they may be less stricter. So let's jump right into this topic of the dietary laws, a diet for the soul. The expression kosher style is misleading and very deceptive. Kosher style, it's either kosher or it's not. Interesting enough, someone who basically deals with different recipes for kosher dishes, and I try to encourage this person to at least take on the label so that way people know what are the processes of making your food available. The person said to me, no, we just only serve kosher style. It has all the elements of kosher, but I, the person who's making it, I'm not an observant Jew. So first of all, that can be an issue. But second of all, you can still make it kosher even though you're not an observant Jew. There's a way around that. Feel free to give me a call and I'll explain how that works. And you can reach me at 786-306-8211. We handle a lot of different labels, a lot of different issues when you deal with manufacturing of food for the general public. So the expression kosher style is misleading and it's very deceptive. Kosher does not stand for any ethnic way of cooking food or for a certain taste. It's a religious term and is very religious in its meaning. Its applicability to determine a set of religious criteria is either food is kosher or it's not. Simply, it's a yay or nay type of situation. Whether the term kosher style is used, the inference is very clear. Through the use of style, it may be a favorite Jewish dish, like for example, gefilte fish, and they are not necessarily kosher if it's not cooked and properly done in the way that is required that it to be done. Actually, the word kosher is religious literature. It's applied to any item that is prepared in accordance with halakha. Thus, we find expression as a kosher Torah, kosher tefillin, kosher mezuzah, kosher talit, which meaning that they were made properly according to the requirements of Jewish law and suitable for ritual use as a Jewish person. A decent person who lives in his life in accordance with religious teachings in every aspect is called Adam Kasher, or a kosher person. Its colloquial usage in English as meaning correct or proper is, for example, a kosher deal is very true to the classical Hebrew usage, but nevertheless, the term is most likely used in relationship to food, and that its context that we would use the word kosher. For the same reason, we shall use the term treifa to designate everything that is not kosher, although in Jewish law the term is technically applied when dealing with animals whose organs are damaged or diseased. Did you know, for example, when they slaughter an animal, the slaughterers or the people that are involved in checking, they have to make sure that the organs are not damaged or full of disease. If they find that it is, in most cases, they will declare the animal and the slaughter as treifa, which means not kosher or not fit for Jewish consumption. And so this is what makes a big distinction. Now you will see that there are two different applications. For example, when you see the expression halak basar, which means that the animal slaughtered and the lungs were checked and there were no lesions or damages to it. Others would say, no, we can allow some slight lumps and lesions on the log and still be considered kosher. And you'll find that most of the rulings in today's kosher meat business happens to be the previous one. According to Sephardic tradition, it has to be no lesions whatsoever. It has to be smooth. And thus they declare it kosher. And this is why there's a difference, believe it or not, between meat which is done by a Sephardic kosher slaughterhouse versus an Ashkenazic slaughterhouse. So this will give you some idea of the technicalities and why perhaps Sephardic meat, Beit Yosef, tends to be more expensive than, say, Rabashkin meat, or say Agri meat, or say whatever other meat that may be out there in circulation. Now, the Jewish dietary law prescribes not merely a diet for the body, but a diet for the soul, because we are what we eat, and what you put in your mouth, it does have an effect to your soul. The faithful Jews observe laws of kashrut not because he's become endeared of its specific details, or because it provides him with a pleasure, or because he considers them good for his health, or in regards to the divine commandments, or yields his will before the will of the divine and the disciplines imposed by his faith. In the words of the sages, a man ought not to say, I do not wish to eat the flesh of pigs because I don't like it. Rather, he should say just the opposite. Heaven has decreed otherwise. Pig meat is good, tastes good, it has a great savor, but God has commanded me not to eat the flesh of swines. Although the benefit arising from many inexplicable laws of God as in their practice and not understanding why they were given is nevertheless the Jews never tires of pursuing his quest to fathom the very mind of the divine, to ascertain the reason that was prompted the promulgation of God's law in this area of what we eat. It's like someone asked me, so what's the difference between a Kentucky Fried Chicken and a chicken that usually costs like 2 times the amount in the kosher store? First of all, let's be honest. Kentucky Fried Chicken is very, very tasty, and it does not go nor qualify to be fit for eating by a Jew. Why? Let me tell you how they make it. First of all, they get the chicken, which we don't know how it was slaughtered. We don't know if it just basically they knocked it over the head, or just basically gave it a bang with a knife, causing all types of trauma to take place in the chicken. And then they take the chicken, once they have it there, they thaw it, they put it with buttermilk. As you know, we're not allowed to have milk and meat together, especially when it has to do with poultry, since it's a rabbinical decree, not one from a biblical decree. We need to distinguish between what is biblical and what is rabbinical. So on that level alone, even though you say, well, they just dipped it into the buttermilk, they let it thaw in there, they let it sucked all the juices of the buttermilk with their special seasoning, their special KFC seasoning. And whether you want original or extra crispy, it is not kosher for Jewish consumption. No matter how you try to pray over it, no matter how you say, oh, God bless the Kentucky Fried Chicken so I can eat it. It's not kosher. Sorry. Close by here in Miami, there was a restaurant that used to serve what they would call the KFC equivalent. Didn't even come close. Just to give you an idea. But it was tasty, it was crunchy, it was like an extra crispy type of chicken, delicious, but wasn't at the same level of the Kentucky Fried Chicken. Sorry. Wish we could be able to find something close to that. I'm still looking for a kosher chicken place that can make kosher chicken like they do over there at KFC, which is not kosher. For man's faith is sure that it is the reason to exist is because of divine decree. Therefore, we do it because God says so, and that's it. Before proceeding on this quest, let us put into rest this wide misconception that kashrut law are just some type of ancient health measures to help clean up our act. No, it's not. They may be encouraged by the English translation where the terms clean or unclean are used to describe the creatures that may or may not be eaten. And to the person watching, the Torah in translation in English, the words clean and unclean are understood in terms of physical cleanliness and unclean cleanliness, and the assumption is quickly drawn that it's a matter of hygiene. It has nothing to do with hygiene. The fact that the pig, a commonly eaten domestic animal to the Jews, have had a particular aversion, also by the way, to the Muslims, it's an animal which traditionally is pictured as wallowing in dirt and mud, which is traditionally pictured in this way with diseases of trichinosis, which is associated with it, and only serves to strengthen this misconception. The special aversion to pig is more of a result of his historical factors, for it was this non-kosher animal that was the oppressors oftentimes tried to force upon the Jews, especially Jews of Spain, as a means of denying his faith. This is why it became so distasteful when other fellow Jews would call those Jews who basically had converted to Christianity by force as marranos, swine. They're still Jews. And it doesn't mean that they took at heart the faith of Christianity sincerely, because they did so, they declare it because they were forced to the point of death. I won't get into the whole historical thing because there's a whole entire movement taking place from people from that ancestry of Anusim, those that were forced to convert to Christianity, and there's so many Christians coming out from that world and becoming Jews, living a life as a Jew and no longer as what they were before. It's a great movement taking place worldwide. If you don't believe me, contact Jeannie Milgram and she can testify to this fact. Who's Jeannie Milgram? Reach me, I'll tell you who she is. She does incredible work with the Anusim, just like Rabbi Abraham de Leon Cohen did incredible work in Brazil and throughout Latin America, which we're still working with many of these people. In our history records many martyrs who suffered death because they simply resisted to have pig. Simple hygiene would not have explained the prohibition against eating camel or horses or rabbits or hare or even cockroaches or ants, commonly eaten foods in many parts of the world. Even monkeys, which may or may not be dirtier than even cows or goats. The Torah permits the eating of barnyard fowls, chickens, which have no greater reputation for cleanliness than any of the other mentioned. In fact, the term in Hebrew to designate clean and unclean animals are tahor and tamai, or tamai. These are terms that are never used to describe physical cleanliness or uncleanliness, but rather the spiritual and moral state of being. So the word tamai means contaminated, It's only in relationship to moral and religious deficiencies to contaminate the soul and the character of a man, particularly when it involves incest or idol worship that characterizes the absence of ritual purity. So tahor means pure. Tamai means impure. The English words for clean and unclean are therefore to be understood as purity and defilement, contamination, in the spiritual and ritual sense. For example, a clean tongue, a dirty mouth, or a dirty mind. Who shall ascend to the mountains of the Lord? A man with clean, tahor, hands. All provides examples of how the English clean and unclean are used in a moral sense and a spiritual sense. And it is this sense only that in the Hebrew word, tahor and tamai, is used consistently in the laws of kashrut and are to be understood in this level. There are people who are also tahor. There are people who are also tamai. They're completely impure. Even though some parts of kosher code deals with the ideas of diseases and organ injuries, that makes the animal treifa. And it's for that reason they're clearly hygienic and health related. And while Jews have never questioned the hygienic wholesome of dietary laws, which they should, by the way, the commandments of the Lord shall not be beneficial to a man in every respect, physical as well as spiritual. Hygienic or health considerations were never regarded as prime purpose for kashrut. Furthermore, the limitation on the creature that could be eaten, the requirements of ritual slaughter, the removal of the blood, the mere non-cooking of meat and milk together, all of these and more do not at all support the validity of the ancient theory of ancient health measures. So that we have now dispelled, that kosher has nothing to do with how clean the animal is. It's only hints or clues of the biblical text itself, which provides for the reason for all of the regulations, and in most instances where food laws are referred to in the Torah, specifically where we can find a call of holiness, to be a people separate and distinct by what we eat. So we become what we eat, either kosher or completely tamei, impure. For this reason, Leviticus or Vayikra chapter 11, we get an instance of an entire section which lists what may and may not be eaten. Here's the list of foods that we can have and what we cannot have. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not further processes in order to be able to eat them. Obviously, if you're going to have some lettuce, which is completely kosher, you need to make sure you wash it thoroughly and there's no insect because we're not allowed to eat bugs. So what does it say in Leviticus? For I am the Lord your God. Sanctify yourself and be holy, for I am holy, says in Leviticus chapter 11, verse 14. Elsewhere, for you are a people consecrated to the Lord your God, and you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. For those of you who have read this before, it literally means the milk of the mother in the milk of the mother combined with the actual meat of its mother, which happens to be beef in this case. But this was later applied also to chicken and milk by the rabbis. So that rule comes from the rabbis. This one, it comes from the Torah, Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 21. So you shall be holy men to me, and therefore you shall not eat flesh torn by beast in the fields. In other words, roadkill is something that we do not eat. Exodus chapter 22, verse 30. The later directive is in fact part of the section dealing with the acts of justice and righteousness, in which too we have the purpose of sanctifying the people. So if you want to start your road into living a holy life, into living a life that God commands, then these rules of kosher and not kosher becomes of great importance to you, the Jew, first. And if you want to become Jew, you want to become part of the people, you need to understand these rules and why we keep them as a people. If you're a Jew who happens to love treifa or treif, then you need to revisit your agreement, your contract with God. and come back to holy living by having a holy dietary life. The idea of holiness is reinforced by the Torah, relating that these laws to caution against defilement, the opposite of holiness. It affects your soul. It affects your brain. When you begin to eat non-kosher as a Jew, it affects you internally. For not only are the forbidden creatures designated as tamai, but Israel repeatedly warned not to defile itself with things that are called tamai, impure. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 43 through 44. The emphasis on holiness as a reason for the purpose of kashrut regulation deserves to be better understood and appreciated as an integral part of the entire picture of Judaism, and it has many ramifications. To distinguish between the beast which is to be eaten and the beast which is not to be eaten is something which the law talks about. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 47. And it's an aspect of broader requirements to learn to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, not only in food but in all areas of life. It also includes in areas of sexuality, of morality, of ethical and spiritual aspect. The laws of kashrut do not stand alone for the purpose and goals from the disciplines that demands that are part of the total picture of Judaism. To treat kashrut in isolation is literally to distort and misunderstand it. This is why there are people who say, oh, what does that have to do with me eating a regular chicken from the store or a regular piece of beef that was slaughtered anyhow, perhaps with a bullet in the head? What's the difference? It's still in the categories? No, because we go beyond just the category. How it was slaughtered. Which way was it completely removed its organs? Did they pour out the blood? It's a whole series of issues, especially when you deal with meat, that becomes of great concern to the Jewish people. In Judaism, holiness does not mean an ascetic, saintly withdrawal from life. Holiness does not insist upon self-denial or any legitimate human pleasure, nor the total repression of any bodily drives, but neither does it condone self-indulgence. It doesn't condone gluttony. It doesn't condone drunkenness, which are the hallmarks of a stubborn and rebellious and incorrectable son, as we read in Deuteronomy 21, chapter 21, verse 18 through 21. I mean, after all, I've seen the leaders of our people on certain occasions get so drunk that you understand why it is incorrect, it's wrong to be indulged in such a level that they lose total control. And this is regarded as abomination in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 18 through 21. The lack of self-control and readiness to satisfy one's craving, regardless of their merit, regardless of their propriety, regardless of their legality, were indicative of spiritual weakness and moral decay. Guaranteed you, where you see drunkenness in any shul, where you see the rabbis swaying back and forth and falling to the ground, completely puking up, I've seen it. That's an indication that rabbi in particular has lost control and mastery over his passion and self-discipline, and really become a Chilul Hashem to the Jewish community and anyone who sees it. This is why one needs to be trained to resist the craving for the forbidden food and drinks that tempt him and may strengthen him to the capacity to resist the craving for forbidden sexual involvement that may tempt him too. It may also strengthen his capacity to resist forbidden unethical actions that may hold forth the promise of tempting financial status and rewards. And the transference of this religious discipline to other areas is not guaranteed. But there is no denying that the inherent value in religious discipline intended to train and to resist one's bodily drives and urges just to satisfy a craving or experience of pleasure. The biblical call to holiness is reflected by Judaism's attempt to elevate the satisfaction of all basic urge. It is to take your urge and drive it in the proper way, not the improper way. For food, drink, sex, which we differ not from any beast unto a level worthy of man. So when we talk about kashrut or kosher, it's an example of how to live a Jewish life and raise oneself above the mundane acts, from the most routine activities into a religious experience. What narrow minds look upon is a picayune concern with trifling kitchen matters is really an example of how Judaism elevates the mere physical satisfaction of one's appetite into a spiritual act by the emphasis of the ever-present God and our duty to serve Him at all times. I'm going to pause here because one of the sayings that has so infected even our Jewish world is the idea, listen, after all, what you put in your mouth, it goes down your stomach and is emptied out the other side and becomes dung. This comes from a different religion. The idea that what you eat really does make no sense. You can eat whatever you want and everything is okay is contrary to what the Torah says. You are what you eat. And before you put something in your mouth, bless God for what you're going to take into your mouth. Bless God. This is why the blessings become so important, that you know which blessings go to what food. The table upon which food is served became identified in Jewish tradition, a traditional thought, with the temple of the altar. This is why our table is considered like the altar of the temple. When the temple stood, sacrifices would secure atonement for an individual. Now, his table does this, according to Hagigah, chapter 27a. Was the way it was put in the Talmudic sages. So we're going to continue with this thought of the dietary laws, how it really makes a person holy by changing your dietary conduct on a regular basis. I don't like, Rabbi, I don't like meat. That's fine. You may like chicken. You may like fish. But you still need to know what rules apply to what levels of food, what you can and can't have. For example, and with this I'm going to end. There is a fish that in Turkey and in a lot of Latin America they have it, but by the Ashkenaz they consider it by and large not kosher. Why? Because this particular fish, once it's taken out of the water, loses its scale. And as we know, one of the symbols or signs of a fish being kosher is that it has to have scales and fins. Well, this fish, which is eaten widespread by a lot of Sephardim, I don't like the fish personally. It's not my type of fish, but it is a fish that basically loses its scale once it's taken out of the water, but has fins. By the Ashkenaz, by the Ramah, they have ruled it as not kosher. By many Sephardic communities, it's kosher because it had scales. It's the first sign that it has, and therefore that is one of the signs. Second sign, it had fins, or has fins. So it completes the two levels, fulfilling what's required to have a food that we can put in our mouth to eat. So in that case, many Sephardims rule that type of fish is kosher. The Ashkenaz say, no, it's not kosher. It loses its scale, and therefore there's no longer a sign. We say it had a sign, but it lost it. Since it had its sign, it's kosher. When it had it, and therefore when you take it out, it doesn't lose the status of kosher. That's one of the elements and arguments that you'll see in the area of kashrut and kosher items of food. So stay tuned with what we're having to say. We need to learn this. It's very important that you learn to keep kosher in your daily life. And we need to know what are the forbidden foods, which we're going to take a look at that in our next video. Shalom, shalom.